This is one of a series of Good Answers presentations. This time we will be considering how well or how badly the human middle ear is designed. Can we improve on it? And is it the result of an evolutionary process that brought it from the primitive ear of an ancient reptilian creature? I must express thanks to one of my chief sources here, Dr. Stuart Burgess' remarkable study, Ultimate Engineering. An engineer investigates the biomechanics of the body. Let's begin by surveying just what our ears can do. First, they can detect an astonishing range of sounds, from the buzzing of a mosquito across the room to the takeoff roar of a private jet. That's on the macro level. On a finer level, they can distinguish a difference in volume of half a decibel. At least a young person can, usually. That's volume. Moreover, we all can hear the difference between 2 and a B flat, but we can also distinguish tones that are only 1/10 that far apart. We have all wanted to know which way a sound is coming from, and we look around and can usually localize it. But how? Well, the sound vibrations reach both our ears, but at a minuscule difference in time. Actually, about 1/100th of the time that two of the same waves of sound reach us. Then our brain triangulates that difference. That's why turning our heads helps, to arrive at the approximate direction. And of course, we can recognize our nephew's voice on the phone, even with a poor connection. Long before voice print we knew whose voice we were hearing. And finally, our ears can protect themselves when we encounter very loud noises. Let's look at some of these more closely. Volume, as we know, is measured in decibels. The buzzing measured in decibels. The buzzing of a mosquito about 10 feet away is near to 0 decibels. A whisper, 20 to 30. Our voice in the library, soft enough for the librarian to ignore, 30 to 40. And normal conversation, about twice that. A shout, of course, significantly more. And a jet taking off is at our upper limit, and that's often painful. Then there is the range of frequency, what a subwoofer emits. We can barely hear that. A dog's bark from 100 to 3,000 hertz, from Chihuahua to Husky, or thereabout. Human speech is somewhere near the mid-range of frequencies, but a canary goes higher. Now, there's something interesting when we compare these. Conversation is, naturally, at a volume we find most comfortable. If it were not, we'd probably say, "You speak up a little?" And the frequency level of that speech is where our ears are the most sensitive. Together, they are a sweet spot for our ears to accommodate. So we can detect a very wide range of volume in sound, and a similarly wide range of frequencies. But there's a sweet spot, suggesting that our ears are engineered or optimized for humans to communicate. And brings us to engineering. We probably saw a diagram of the ear's elements in school somewhere. Many component parts just to allow us to hear. Now, in terms of how the sequence is constructed, Just how good a system is it? Could a good engineer improve on it? Elliott and Shira, in the Journal of Smart Materials and Structures, gave their judgment. In some regards, the ear operates at the limit of what is physically possible and far beyond what human engineers can produce. So, we could build one, but it would be rather like a square wheel next to a perfect disc. Let's do a quick review of the process to give us some context, because a closer look is coming up. It's pretty impressive when we see the path a friend's hello takes to your brain. Those sound waves his vocal apparatus produced are caught by your ear and vibrate. 3 tiny bones, my school teacher called them hammer, anvil, and stirrup, vibrate in turn, transferring the sound energy to the cochlear window, and its vibration produces waves in the fluid behind it. Those pressure waves move tiny hairs, which in turn stimulate a forest of nerve endings that gather into the auditory nerve and notify the brain that the hello goes from air to tissue to 3 bones to tissue to fluid to hairs and to nerves. But how good is it? Well, dogs must have a better system because they always notice a faint sound before we do and alert us something's coming. But it's not better as a whole, just different. Here's what Dr. Burgess says. In fact, humans have all-round hearing capabilities that are just right for human activities. Actually have superior hearing to animals in terms of differentiating among very similar sounds. Such a capability is crucial for activities like human speech, where different syllables can have very similar sounds. No offense, Rover. Just stay on watch for us. Now for some specifics. Here's a diagram of the middle ear. The 3 bones there make up a chain of levers managed by 4 ligaments and 2 tiny muscles. The arrangement is irreducibly complex. That is, each part is essential to the function. Missing 1 bone or 1 ligament, and you have what amounts to an analog watch with a missing gear. Just a bunch of parts that does nothing. And exactly how does that chain of transmission work? Dr. Burgess admits the exact dynamics of the linkage system are highly intricate and remain under investigation. In other words, even the experts are still trying to understand it. And the middle ear is incredibly and delicate. The stapes is the smallest bone in the body, and the muscle controlling it, the stapedius, is the smallest muscle. Why, the whole cavity we are seeing here is about the width of a grain of rice. An uncooked one at that. Note what Dr. Burgess says here. A unique feature of the ear bones is that they do not grow during childhood. This is not surprising, because the design is so delicate that growing could misalign the precise arrangement. We hear a lot about microcircuitry. Here we have it in bone, ligament, and muscle. This almost microscopic structure does 3 things. It links the eardrum magnifying the sound by about 18 times, and protects against loud noises. That system is finely tuned to protect its function and us. It has a built-in acoustic reflex designed to protect against sudden noises, whether brief or continuous. The reflex is triggered by any noise as loud as 70 to 100 decibels. Louder than that, and we risk damage. The immediate reaction is for the stapedius muscle to contract, pulling the stapes away from the oval window and protecting the delicate hairs in the cochlea. Simultaneously, the other muscle contracts to stiffen the chain of bones. How quickly does this occur? Between 10 to 150 milliseconds. 10, that's 100th of a second. That's its most rapid response, but it may take up to 150 and a half. It depends on how loud and how sudden the noise is. A window shattering or a leaf blower starting up. The reaction time differs as much as is required. With that crash course in middle ear function, we come to a major issue. Mainstream science tells us that the system evolved, and in this way. The synapsid, a reptilian that flourished some 300 million or so years ago, the three bones of our middle ear derived one from that, one from the back of the skull, and one from the lower jaw. Riley Black, in Smithsonian Magazine, described it like this. The synapsid reptile's jaw bones closest to the back of the jaw became smaller and specialized to transmit vibrations to the ear, improving synapsid hearing. The malleus, incus, and stapes of our inner ear are the remnants of these ancient jaw bones. This description is about as detailed as one finds, and it leaves quite a few things unresolved. First, there is scant fossil evidence to show us this migration occurring, so we are left with various ear-related features, but little to show their progression. In an attempt to fill in the gaps, we find this kind of language. Although Prosterodon is not a direct ancestor of mammals, its inner ear with distinctive cochlear cavity represents a connecting link between the primitive theraspid inner ear and the mammalian inner ear. So, Prosterodon isn't one of our supposed great-grandfathers, but it has a feature that would help prove the evolutionary sequence. So let's use it anyway. And how did the creature hear during the millions of years as the bones were migrating in tiny steps? They were along the way, Dr. Black says. But what reshaped each one so exactly as they must be to function correctly? And what process linked them together in this precise configuration? And anyway, the system of these three bones. There are 4 ligaments to position them and 2 muscles to manipulate them. Where did those come from? And perhaps most crucial, what new information did that synapsid's DNA come up with to direct this elaborately choreographed dance? No blueprint, no product. What we see here in this tiny space is an irreducibly complex mechanism, tuned to amplify the sound energy enough for us to hear a mosquito buzzing, but reactive enough to protect our hearing from loud sounds, precise enough for us to distinguish the slightest difference in pitch or in volume, and to enable us to localize incoming sound. Lots of questions here, and the answers the paleoanthropologists provide, well, it all just happened. One is reminded of Rudyard Kipling's famous "Just So," how various animals acquired various parts of their anatomy. Here's a cover illustration showing us how the elephant got that long trunk of his. Kipling at least told the kids how these things just happened. We don't even get that much from the evolutionists. Time perhaps for a final word from our chief source, since he has at least one more thing to say about this subject. We also possess a remarkable reflex that reduces the perception of sound when we are vocalizing. This helps us to be less distracted by external sounds when speaking. The stapedius reflex, triggered in anticipation of one speaking, reduces by some 20 decibels. In other words, that little device keeps us from having to strain to ignore traffic noise while giving a stranger directions. But then, how could a feature like that have evolved? It doesn't have any conceivable survival value. And all new features must convey that, says Darwinism. Oh, did I say a final word? Turns out there is one more thing that Dr. Engineer with a career-long fascination with the body's engineering, and with extensive experience in designing prosthetic devices, artificial knees, hands, feet, and more, his opinion on what we can and can't do in the lab carries weight. And he says, humans can make Rolex watches. We are far from being able to construct even a crude but passable replica of the middle ear, much less one that, as part of a larger system, can build itself during embryological development. Score one more for the great designer, right? If you have questions or comments about this lecture, or in the Good Answers series, you may direct them to me, Dr. Jerry C. 4 at yahoo.com.